Lucien Blackmoor had become absolutely unbearable. At school, his entire demeanor toward Elara shifted from just being distant to outright cruel. Where he once seemed to actively avoid her, he now made it a point to seek her out, only to push her away even harder, especially in front of an audience. His words became daggers, each one sharper than the last. His tone was laced with a mocking cruelty she hadn't heard before. It all came to a head in class one afternoon. When Elara answered a professor's question, Lucien let out a quiet, cutting laugh. "You should stay quiet," he whispered, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "It suits you." A hush fell over the room. Elara felt a flush of heat rise to her cheeks, but she swallowed the hurt, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. By lunchtime, however, her carefully constructed dam of patience finally broke. Sitting with her friends, she slammed her tray down a little too hard. "I don't care about Lucien Blackmoor," she announced, her voice much louder than she intended. "He's not a good guy. In fact, I don't even want to look at him, let alone waste my breath talking about him." And in that moment, she truly believed it. She was done. Or at least she was trying to be. That evening, everything changed. The last bus to the hostel, the one Elara always took, never arrived. Stranded, she was left with only one choice: walk. The road back was a narrow, lonely stretch of asphalt that cut directly through a dense, primeval jungle. The trees grew so thick and tall that their branches intertwined overhead, forming a canopy that completely blotted out the moonlight. It was an intimidating path, even on a good day. Elara hesitated for a moment, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. Then she chided herself for being foolish. It was just a walk. She took a deep breath and started down the road. The silence was the first thing she noticed. It was heavy, oppressive, wrapping around her like a blanket. It was a silence that felt wrong, too heavy. Every crunch of her shoes on the gravel seemed to echo into an unnatural void. With each step, the feeling of being watched grew stronger, a prickling sensation on the back of her neck. Leaves rustled in the undergrowth, but there was no wind to stir them. Her pace quickened, her casual walk turning into a brisk stride. And then she heard it, a howl. It started low, a mournful, distant sound that vibrated through the air. A moment later, it was answered by another, closer this time. Elara's breath hitched in her throat. Her heart, which had been thumping nervously, began to pound against her ribs like a trapped bird. She broke into a full-blown run, her backpack bouncing wildly against her shoulders. The howling grew closer, surrounding her, seeming to come from all directions at once, and then they appeared. Two massive shapes stepped out from the trees and onto the road just ahead, blocking her path. Wolves. But they were unlike any wolves she had ever seen in pictures or on TV. They were enormous, their bodies broader and more muscular than any natural creature. And their eyes glowed with a faint, unnatural light that pierced right through the thick darkness. They didn't snarl or growl. They just stood there, waiting, their gaze fixed on her. Elara froze, her feet feeling as if they were bolted to the ground. The wolves took a coordinated step forward, then another, and then someone stepped between them, Lucien. He emerged from the shadows so silently, it was as if the night itself had released him. He didn't say a word to her. He didn't even turn to look back. He just stood there, a dark silhouette against the glowing eyes of the beasts, his own eyes locked onto theirs. Time seemed to stretch, pulling taut like a rubber band. The standoff felt like an eternity. Finally, the wolves lowered their heads in a gesture that looked unnervingly like submission. One by one, they turned and retreated back into the jungle, vanishing as silently and suddenly as they had appeared. Lucien let out a long, slow breath he seemed to have been holding. Elara just stared at him, completely stunned. The terror that had paralyzed her moments before was replaced by a tidal wave of disbelief. Why Why would he risk himself for her like that? Where had he even come from? And the biggest question of all, why had those monstrous wolves listened to him? Lucien finally turned to face her, and for the first time, she saw him without the cruel mask. There was no mockery in his eyes, no cold indifference. There was only a tightly coiled restraint, a deep-seated pain, and something that looked dangerously close to fear. "Go home," he said, his voice quiet but firm. Before she could find her voice to ask a single one of the 1,000 questions swirling in her mind, he stepped back into the shadows and disappeared. He left Elara standing alone on that dark, silent road, with a new set of answers she was no longer sure she wanted. If this night changed everything for you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because Nocthaven has just crossed a line it can never return from. Thanks for watching.